Our story begins with the legendary General Lu Bu, who realizes with horror that in less than 3 minutes, he has been surrounded by 200,000 of Cao Cao's troops. He is trapped in Xiaopei, facing the final moments of his life at the White Gate Tower. Confronted with such a catastrophic start, anyone would feel the pressure. In just 3 days, his subordinates Ho Chung and Song Xian plan to bind him and hand him over to Cao Cao as a peace offering. Killing them would be easy enough, but Cao Cao is the real problem. With the enemy commander personally leading the siege, Lu Bu wonders how he can possibly break through and survive. His gaze turns toward his advisor, Chen Gong. He asks Chen Gong what plan they could possibly use to stay alive. The advisor remains silent for a long moment before finally speaking. Slowly, he explains that given the current situation, there is no such thing as a foolproof plan for survival. At best, they can only risk everything on one final, desperate struggle. Even the most skilled strategist cannot make something out of nothing. And that is exactly the predicament they find themselves in. Outside the city walls, Cao Cao's army is powerful and well-rested. To make matters worse, the enemy has diverted the Yi and Xi rivers to flood the area. Now, the entire city of Xiaopei is drowning, and only the East Gate offers a way out. The walls to the west, south, and north are surrounded by a vast expanse of water, making any passage in those directions completely impossible. Inside the city, the military force has dwindled to a mere 5,000 men. It is a grim outlook, to say the least. Morale is at an all-time low, and they are outnumbered by a staggering margin. In this situation, not even the greatest strategists in history could find an easy fix. Lu Bu notes that a desperate struggle might lead to death, but it is better than doing nothing at all. If they simply wait for the end, they likely won't even see tomorrow's sun. At this point, any possibility is a plan worth considering. Chen Gong mentions that Cao Cao's rear is currently vulnerable, and regions like Yanzhou and Yuzhou have always been contested territories. He suggests that if they can somehow hold the city until next spring, other warlords like Yuan Shao and Zhang Xiu will surely attack Cao Cao from behind. However, Lu Bu looks at his troops and sees only low morale. These men have no desire to fight to the death for a lost cause. Deep down, he knows the soldiers are exhausted and simply want the fighting to end, which, naturally, makes a long siege nearly impossible. The common people and the local elite within the city are not on their side either. They certainly won't be helping them hold the line. With the floodwaters soaking the foundations, the city walls won't stand much longer. This plan, unfortunately, is simply not feasible. Using both rewards and punishments to stabilize the army's morale wouldn't be too difficult to manage. He could even use force to intimidate the local elite families into submission, if it came to that. But the walls of Xiaopei have long been in disrepair, and with the floodwaters rising, time is running out. Under this constant soaking, even the strongest fortifications would likely collapse within 10 days or 2 weeks. Hoping for Yuan Shao or Zhang Xiu to harass Cao Cao's rear is a gamble they simply don't have time for. Chen Gong continues, noting that in this freezing weather, moving an army is no easy feat for anyone. Among the nearby lords, only Yuan Shu has the actual strength to come to their rescue right now. If Lu Bu trusts him, Chen Gong is willing to risk his life to break through and meet with Yuan Shu. He vows to convince Yuan Shu to bring reinforcements, no matter what it takes to save them. However, Lu Bu knows that while Yuan Shu might have helped a month ago, the situation has changed. Even if Lu Bu personally knelt and apologized, Yuan Shu would likely still leave them to their fate. He trusts Chen Gong, of course, but it's futile. Others like Chen Deng have already secretly defected to Cao Cao. Even if Chen Gong managed to fight his way out and convince Yuan Shu, the journey would take weeks. It would still be too late. Chen Gong sighs, realizing Xiaopei is now surrounded by water on 3 sides. The only way out is through the East Gate, where Lu Bu could potentially organize a small detachment. With no reinforcements coming, it seems breaking through the siege is the only option left on the table. But Cao Cao is famously cautious. He has surely fortified the East Gate and stationed scouts everywhere else. Beyond the walls lies a flat plain with no mountains or forests to provide any cover for an escape. Evading Cao Cao's scouts in such open terrain is nearly impossible, even for a warrior of Lu Bu's caliber. Even if he fought his way out alone, where could he go without his army? He has considered this many times. No matter which direction they run, the chance of escape remains slim. Chen Gong looks at him with burning intensity, asking how much he truly trusts Wen Yuan. He hesitates for a moment. Wen Yuan, also known as Zhang Liao, is a veteran general, but he has always been a man of strict integrity. Deep down, he knows Zhang Liao never approved of his past actions. In this dire situation, can they really place their lives in his hands? Zhang Liao's leadership is undoubtedly top tier, but the problem is simple. He isn't part of the inner circle. While Chen Gong and Gao Shun are trapped inside, Zhang Liao remains outside with his troops. He hasn't surrendered to Cao Cao, but he hasn't launched a desperate rescue mission either. Technically, he is still a general under Lu Bu's command. However, history suggests that once Lu Bu falls, Zhang Liao will likely lead his men to surrender. At this critical juncture, he simply doesn't dare to trust Zhang Liao completely. It isn't about character, it's about the reality of their positions. Chen Gong bows solemnly, stating that if Lu Bu can trust Wen Yuan fully, there might be a path to survival. If not, there is no hope. Without that trust, they are merely sitting ducks waiting for the end. Zhang Liao's history is a long one, serving many masters before Lu Bu. He served Ding Yuan, then He Jin, then Dong Zhuo, before finally joining Lu Bu. His talent is undeniable, but his loyalty has moved before. He isn't a die-hard confidant like Gao Shun. To ask for complete trust in him seems, to be honest, almost impossible under these circumstances. Yet Chen Gong's message is clear. Without that trust, they are dead men. After weighing the options for a long time, he finally turns serious. He asks Chen Gong what the plan would be if he did decide to trust Wen Yuan completely. The siege of Xiaopei has already lasted 2 months. We see Cao Cao's forces growing stronger by the day, swelling from 20,000 men to nearly 30,000 as the local tides turn. Because Lu Bu is trapped in a lone city with no way out, the elite families of Shuzhou have naturally begun to shift their allegiances to Cao Cao. The scattered remnants of defeated armies in the region are also flocking to Cao Cao's banner. Meanwhile, our protagonist's situation is the exact opposite. Before the war began, he had over 10,000 troops. After a series of brutal battles, he is left with barely 7 or 8,000. With Zhang Liao leading 2,000 men outside, only 5,000 remain to defend the city. And Cao Cao isn't alone in his planning. Cao Cao is advised by Guijia and Sun Yu, whose strategic brilliance rivals Chen Gong's, while Liu Bei stands by to fan the flames. With traitors like Chun Ding assisting from the shadows, he still can't see how trusting Zhang Liao will change their inevitable fate. He asks what this supposed survival plan actually is. Chen Gong replies by asking him to imagine, for a moment, that he and Cao Cao had swapped places. He asks what strategy he would use to conquer Xiaopei. After thinking it over, our protagonist notes that while his own forces are few, they are formidable. Most of his soldiers are veterans who have followed him since the Bingzhou days, and their combat power remains high despite the city being flooded. Since the walls are still standing, a direct assault would be foolish. If he were Cao Cao, he would simply wait for the city to descend into internal chaos. He would wait for the right moment to strike. Hearing this, Chen Gong gives him a look of slight surprise, a rare moment of tactical agreement, and nods. He agrees that Cao Cao is indeed waiting for them to fall apart from within. So he suggests, what if they actually helped him along by staging a revolt? He asks what Cao Cao would do if certain soldiers truly appeared to rebel. It suddenly clicks for Lu Bu. He realizes Chen Gong wants to set a trap. The idea is to have the garrison feign a rebellion to lure Cao Cao's main army into a premature attack, which, to be honest, is quite a bold gamble. Then, they would secretly signal Wen Yuan to lead his troops in a raid on Cao Cao's supply lines. If the grain burns, the enemy will have to retreat. Hearing this response, Chen Gong can't help but let out a quiet sigh. For a moment, he thought his lord had suddenly become a brilliant strategist. But as soon as Lu Bu spoke, his true nature was revealed once again. We see Chen Gong's face take on an expression of utter, weary resignation. Lu Bu ponders the situation, noting that the enemy has them surrounded on all sides. There is simply no way to send a message to Wen Yuan. That is the first major hurdle. Furthermore, Cao Cao is famously cautious and loves cutting off other supply lines himself. He won't be easily fooled. Trying to raid the enemy's supplies in such a rush seems unlikely to succeed. And then, there is the third and perhaps most dangerous problem. The soldiers in the city have already lost their will to fight. If they stage a fake rebellion and it goes wrong, they might just set themselves on fire. Chen Gong suddenly smiles, noting that his lord has finally learned to spot the key weaknesses. However, he never said anything about raiding supplies. It seems the pressure of life and death is finally sharpening Lu Bu's mind. Even if he didn't guess the plan correctly, he identified the right risks. Lu Bu rubs his brow in frustration, asking Chen Gong to stop speaking in riddles and just tell him the plan directly. He's had enough of the suspense. Chen Gong turns serious, explaining that his strategy is divided into 3 distinct steps, and the first step is exactly what they discussed. They must intentionally create chaos within the city walls. They need Cao Cao to believe, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the garrison has turned. The idea is to look overwhelmed, as if they want to surrender just to survive. Once Cao Cao leads his army to attack, we move to the second step. The plan is for Wen Yuan to lead all his soldiers in a sudden strike from the flank, straight into the enemy's rear. Cao Cao, meanwhile, will be focused entirely on breaking the city walls. This sudden assault from behind will surely cause chaos, and our main force can seize that moment to charge out. They would join forces with Wen Yuan to crush Cao Cao's army, then station troops outside for a standoff or break through while the enemy is retreating. Lu Bu ponders this for a moment. It's a decent plan, but as he mentioned before, they currently have no way to communicate with Wen Yuan at all. Without a connection, how can they ensure Wen Yuan attacks the enemy's rear at the exact appointed time? It's a valid concern, to be honest. Chen Gong notes that Cao Cao still has about 25,000 men. However, at least 4,000 or 5,000 of them are surrendered troops from Shuzhou. Given Cao Cao's naturally suspicious character, he won't fully trust them. And since he doesn't trust them, he won't let the Shuzhou army guard his rear. So, if the situation in the city changes, Cao Cao will likely send a trusted general with a small force to guard the supplies in the back. He would then lead the main force himself, bringing those Shuzhou defectors along to charge straight toward the east gate. Before the situation inside the city is even clear, those Shuzhou soldiers will undoubtedly be thrown out as cannon fodder to test the waters. Therefore, while Zhang Liao's small force couldn't possibly raid the main supplies, having him strike the enemy's flank or rear is quite feasible. But we return to the same problem. There is simply no way to contact Zhang Liao right now, which, as we know, is the heart of the matter. Furthermore, Lu Bu isn't even sure what Zhang Liao is thinking. Chen Gong, with a grim expression, says they must send suicide messengers out of the city. Sending just one won't work. They must send at least 10 men to act together. It's a desperate move, but perhaps their only choice. To prevent the enemy from discovering the plot if they are captured, these men must only carry verbal messages, absolutely no written letters. Most importantly, these men must be fiercely loyal to their lord. Even under Cao Cao's most brutal torture, they must not breathe a word of the truth. At this point, Chen Gong rubs his brow, looking utterly exhausted. Whether these 10 men can actually deliver the message is another story entirely. And whether Wen Yuan will even follow the order, well, they can only do their best and leave the rest to fate. Lu Bu suddenly stands up. He begins to pace back and forth in the study with his hands behind his back, his long shadow flickering against the walls in the candlelight. After a long silence, Lu Bu finally stops pacing and stands before Chen Gong. He has one final question. If this plan actually succeeds, where do they go? Once they are out of the city, they must face the fact that Cao Cao's army is no pushover. Chen Gong's plan is merely a surprise maneuver to escape. But we see the problem. It is currently freezing, with heavy snow falling everywhere. To be honest, the conditions outside are brutal. Without a stable camp or sufficient supplies, they couldn't possibly withstand a full charge from Cao Cao. So, once they break out, they must flee immediately. But as for where to run in such a rush, Lu Bu truly has no idea. Chen Gong stands up, his long robes brushing the floor as he bows. He tells his lord that if they survive this disaster and leave the city, the world will be wide open to them. But if the plan fails, well, nothing else matters. Lu Bu nods and orders Gao Shun to be brought to him immediately, stating he has urgent business. Gao Shun is a man who, quite frankly, deserved better. In the original history, after the fall of Xiapi, Gao Shun was captured alongside his lord. It was a tragic end for such a loyal soldier. When he refused to surrender, Cao Cao had him executed in a fit of rage. After that, the battlefield would never again hear his famous battle cry. The cry of the trapped camp, the will to fight, with no thought of life. Lu Bu is self-aware enough to know he needs true suicide messengers now. Aside from his most trusted personal guards, most of his men are just looking for their next meal. They aren't exactly the type to die for a cause. So, if he wants to send a message to Zhang Liao, it's far more reliable to find men from Gao Shun's elite trapped camp. A moment later, Gao Shun arrives. Gao Shun is about 30 years old, standing 7 feet tall, with a powerful, sturdy build. His expression is one of absolute integrity and discipline. Clad in full armor, he carries an aura of cold determination as he walks. He asks his lord what urgent matter requires his presence at this hour. Seeing Lu Bu sitting solemnly in the study, Gao Shun cups his hands in a respectful salute. Lu Bu asks if the blades of the trap camp are still sharp. Gao Shun replies that if the general commands it, the entire trap camp will fight to the death. His character is truly a rare find in these chaotic times. Most soldiers live with their heads on the line, never knowing if they will survive the day. It's a grim way to live, to say the least. Because of this, many generals lose themselves in wine and women, living only for the moment. It's their way of coping with the constant threat of death. Even Lu Bu himself was often like that. But Gao Shun is different. He is pure, dignified, and avoids alcohol, gambling, and lust entirely. In modern terms, he simply doesn't fit in with the crowd. And while the original Lu Bu knew deep down that Gao Shun was fiercely loyal, he was fiercely loyal, yet because Lu Bu disliked his rigid personality, he never truly embraced him. Now, Lu Bu warmly invites Gao Shun to sit and begins explaining his and Chen Gong's new strategy to him in detail. He explains that there are 2 urgent matters for Gao Shun to handle immediately. First, he must select 10 suicide messengers to find a way to deliver a message to Zhang Liao. Second, he must secretly prepare the troops to fight their way out of the city at any moment. Gao Shun remained silent for a moment, thinking back to the recent suspicious behavior of Ho Cheng and the others, which felt like a gathering storm. The plan involves letting them intentionally rebel and defect to the enemy to create chaos within the city. Seeing the doubt in Gao Shun's eyes, Lu Bu maintains an air of profound mystery. Chen Gong chimes in, noting that the situation in the city is worsening by the day, and the resentment Ho Cheng and his peers feel toward their lord is only growing heavier. If nothing unexpected happens, they will likely make their move within the next few days. If Zhang Liao can successfully receive the message and strike the enemy's rear while the city is in chaos, the enemy formation will surely fall into total disarray. Meanwhile, Gao Shun is to lead the elite trapped camp as the vanguard, charging out of the east gate. Many of Cao Cao's troops are recently surrendered soldiers from Shuzhou, whose combat effectiveness is average at best. With Gao Shun leading the charge, they can certainly push through. Once the battlefield shifts outside the walls, a pincer attack will surely defeat Cao Cao's army. Gao Shun ponders this, noting that if the strategist's plan works, the chance of victory is indeed high. However, we see the problem. It is currently freezing cold. To suddenly leave the city without a base means they cannot sustain a long confrontation. Once the enemy regroups and launches a fresh assault, well, what then? In Gao Shun's view, the greatest instability in the city comes from Ho Chung, Wei Su, and Song Xian. He believes that if they simply execute those three, the remaining soldiers will naturally fight to the death to defend Xiapi. Even if the floodwaters outside are rising, staying behind the walls provides at least some defense. Once they run out into the open, they will have absolutely no cover to rely on. Lu Bu speaks in a low, heavy voice, stating he doesn't want to abandon the walls either, but he asks Gao Shun to consider the reality of Xiapi. How much longer can these walls actually hold? Once they collapse, the civilians and noble families will surely panic and flee the city in terror. In that chaos, the city's terrain will prevent their cavalry from being effective. Relying only on those low morale troops to face the enemy would be a disaster. So, breaking out is merely the first step. Once successful, they must move immediately. We see that within the city, there are 5,000 soldiers, and about 2,000 are cavalry who have followed Lu Bu since Chang'an. The remaining 3,000 troops were mostly recruited locally in Shuzhou. To be honest, their loyalty to Lu Bu was never particularly high. Their combat power is average at best, making it impossible to rely on them against Cao Cao's elite. So, Lu Bu's plan is quite simple. Once they break out, they will immediately link up with Zhang Liao's cavalry and flee. As for the infantry who can't keep up, well, at a time like this, they simply cannot be looked after. Seeing that Lu Bu has made up his mind, Gao Shun stands and bows deeply. He declares he will go and make the arrangements. But as Gao Shun turns to leave, Lu Bu asks if he ever regretted following him. In this city of Xiapi, any general might betray him, but Lu Bu knows Gao Shun never would. Yet, the former Lu Bu had distrusted him and kept him at a distance. Deep down, Lu Bu truly feels a sense of guilt toward this loyal man. Gao Shun speaks calmly, noting that while even ancient tyrants had loyal subjects who died for them, he is simply a general under Lu Bu's command, bound to follow him in life or death. He admits he has regretted it, more than once, in fact. But regardless of those moments, he never completely lost hope in his lord. Lu Bu speaks with total sincerity, admitting his past mistakes. He feels he has failed the brothers who came with him from Bingzhou, but promises to change his ways if they survive this crisis. He implores Gao Shun to handle these two urgent tasks. Gao Shun laughs, saying that if they are lucky enough to survive, he will break his own rules and share a great drink with his lord. Lu Bu agrees, promising to personally pour the wine. With the plan settled, Gao Shun steps out of the room and into the wind and snow. Meanwhile, we shift our gaze to the main camp of Cao Cao's army, located just 10 miles east of Xiapi. For this campaign in Shuzhou, Cao Cao has brought a literal galaxy of stars. His generals include Su Chu, Qiao Run, Xiahou Yuan, Qiao Hong, Chen Deng, and many others. His two brilliant strategists, Guo Jia and Sun Yu, are also present. Cao Cao knows Lu Bu is a trapped tiger who must not escape. Consequently, the atmosphere in the enemy camp is far more relaxed than inside the city. After finishing a cup of hot ginger tea, Cao Cao warms his hands and turns to Guo Jia, asking how much longer he estimates the walls of Xiapi can actually stand. When asked how long they can hold, Guo Jia smiles and notes that while the walls might stand for another 2 weeks, the city itself will fall in 2 or 3 days. Cao Cao points out that Lu Bu still has 5,000 troops, most of whom are veterans from Bingzhou. Not only is their combat power high, but they are fiercely loyal. If the walls don't crumble, he worries it will be difficult to break them in such a short time. To be honest, it's a fair concern. Lu Bu is like a tiger in a cage with no hope of escape, so whether he dies sooner or later doesn't truly bother Cao Cao. His real worry is Yuan Shao, who has now unified the 3 northern provinces and will surely lead his army south across the Yellow River next. A far greater threat, indeed. Meanwhile, in Jingzhou, Lu Biao has stationed Zhang Xiu in Nanyang, which poses a direct threat to Cao Cao's rear. And as for the Liangzhou region, now that Li Ju and Guosi are dead, various warlords are fighting for control, leaving the line from Chang'an to Luoyang almost entirely undefended. If they chose to plunder, they could easily sweep back into the east. This is why Cao Cao is so anxious to eliminate Lu Bu. He needs to move his defense. Guo Jia comforts his lord, telling him to rest easy. Xiapi is currently as fragile as a pile of eggs, and morale within the city is naturally crumbling. He adds that Lu Bu's arrogant behavior has cost him the hearts of his people. If his predictions are correct, someone will open the gates and surrender within 3 days. Sun Yu nods in agreement, remarking that Lu Bu lacks the temperament of a true leader. He is a warrior, perhaps, but not a lord. In his prime, he could suppress rivals through sheer force, but now that he is declining, even a small handful of soldiers could take his life. We see that their plan is simply to watch and wait for the inevitable. Cao Cao laughs, deciding that since his strategists are so confident, they will wait a few more days. However, the General Chaoran speaks up. He notes that while Lu Bu is trapped, Zhang Liao still commands about 2,000 cavalry outside the city. To be safe, he asks if they should strike Zhang Liao's camp first. Cao Cao shakes his head, deciding that such a move is unnecessary. He considers Lu Bu a hero of sorts and feels that after he dies, someone should be there to bury him properly. Since Zhang Liao was his subordinate, that task should fall to him. Chao Ren admits he agrees with the plan to recruit Zhang Liao after the city falls, but he remains cautious. He points out that Lu Bu still has the strength for one final struggle, and Zhang Liao's presence outside the city is an unpredictable variable. Unless they ensure every detail is perfect, he admits he won't feel truly at ease. It's a classic case of a general's intuition, really. Cao Cao laughs and tells Zixiao he is overthinking it. While Zhang Liao is a veteran from Bingzhou, he doesn't consider him a true threat under Lu Bu's current state. He is a core general, but more importantly, deep down he has never truly respected Lu Bu as his lord. Currently, he remains outside the city, watching and waiting. He is observing our army's attitude. If we treat the old Bingzhou troops well after the city falls, and then order our soldiers not to disturb the civilians, Zhang Liao will likely surrender. However, if we attack him now, he will be forced to fight back. Some things, to be honest, don't need to be stated so clearly. Cao Cao already understands exactly what Zhang Liao is thinking. Once the city is taken and Lu Bu is executed, sending an envoy to recruit Zhang Liao will almost certainly work. He will likely accept the offer, asking only for Lu Bu's body to be returned to Jiyuan for burial. This would be a final, respectful end to their bond as lord and subject. Seeing that Cao Cao has made up his mind, Chao Ren bows and says no more. Cao Cao then turns to Guijia and asks about the recent movements in Nanyang and Liangzhou. Compared to Yuan Shao, the warlords of Liangzhou and Zhangxiu's forces are far less significant, but they still require attention. To focus entirely on Yuan Shao, the rear must first be stabilized. Guijia explains that in Guangzhou, since the fall of Li Ju and Guisi, the various warlords have descended into chaos, while figures like Han Sui and Ma Teng are expanding their influence. Their power is currently limited to the region west of Tongguan. For the short term, we don't need to worry about them too much. As for Zhangxiu and Wansheng, reports from our spies suggest he is currently bickering with Lu Biao over winter supplies. Furthermore, the freezing weather makes him hesitant to launch any military campaigns. So, until next spring arrives, we have nothing to fear from that direction. Cao Cao sneers, noting that while Lu Biao once secured Jingzhou single-handedly, he has changed. It seems the older he gets, the more narrow-minded he becomes. He is regressing. Guojia adds that when Zhang Xiu surrendered to them previously, Lu Biao already grew to hate him. If he didn't still need Zhang Xiu to block our southern advance, they would have turned on each other long ago. To Lu Biao, Zhang Xiu is essentially a watchdog. He can't let him starve, but he can't feed him too much either. After all, if a dog is too well fed, it either stops biting or turns on its master. Cao Cao notes that since Nanyang and Liangzhou are quiet for now, they will simply keep an eye on them. Once Lu Bu is eliminated and Xuzhou is settled, they can discuss how to deal with Yuan Shao. He then issues an order. All soldiers must stay alert during the night. The time to enter the city is fast approaching. On the battlefield, the generals shouted their assent and departed to prepare. By the fourth watch, near Cao Cao's sleeping quarters, Chao Ren arrived in a great hurry, only to find Su Chu standing guard outside the tent like an immovable iron tower. He asked if the lord was asleep, explaining he had urgent military intelligence. Chao Ren tried to brush past Su Chu to enter the inner tent directly, but unfortunately, Su Chu stood his ground with a wooden expression, blocking his path. He calmly stated that the lord had already retired and any urgent news should be told to him first. He would then decide whether to relay it. Now, Cao Cao was strict with military discipline. Only Chao Ren and Xiahou Dun were usually allowed entry without a summons. Given Chao Ren's special status, the guards typically wouldn't dream of stopping him. However, Su Chu didn't care much for such privileges. In the middle of the night, his lord had finally found sleep, and anyone wishing to wake him would have to get through Su Chu first. Chao Ren grew slightly annoyed. He argued that the patrols had captured several enemy scouts, a clear sign that Lu Bu was desperately seeking outside help. Surely, such a development qualified as urgent. He ordered Su Chu to step aside, but the guard simply shook his head. To him, Lu Bu sending out scouts was perfectly normal. He told the general that if he had actually extracted useful information from the prisoners, he would go and report it immediately. But if the general had learned nothing, he should simply go back. Chao Ren snapped that these scouts were suicide squads. It wasn't exactly easy to make them talk. Su Chu remained silent for a moment before suggesting that if there was no news, the general should return in the morning. After all, reporting a lack of information now would imply the lord himself should go and conduct the interrogation. In the entire camp, there were few men Chao Ren feared, but Su Chu was the commander of the personal guards. Since the death of Dian Wei, he had earned Cao Cao's absolute trust. Furthermore, since he truly hadn't forced a confession from the captives yet, Chao Ren found himself in a difficult position. Deep down, he was fuming. But after weighing his options, he simply snorted and walked away. On the 25th day of the 12th lunar month, 20 miles north of Xiapi, we find Zhang Liao in his main camp, staring intently at a topographical map of the region spread across his desk. There were two major camps near Xiapi, one 10 miles to the east belonging to Cao Cao, and the other being his own. In terms of distance, Cao Cao could have easily led his main force to crush Zhang Liao first before settling in to besiege the city. Yet, despite Zhang Liao being stationed here for over 10 days, Cao Cao's army hadn't bothered him at all, which, to be honest, was quite telling. Zhang Liao understood Cao Cao's strategy perfectly. He was clearly planning to capture Xiapi first and then simply wait for Zhang Liao to surrender on his own. While Zhang Liao had no intention of dying for Lu Bu, many of his veteran Bingzhou soldiers were like brothers to him. Once the city fell, the Shuzhou troops could surrender peacefully, but for his own men, the situation was different. Every one of those Bingzhou soldiers had Chao army blood on their hands, and Cao Cao rarely left loose ends. The only way to save them was to lead the surrender himself and then convince them to serve Cao Cao. Only then could they hope for a good ending. Yet, even though Zhang Liao had made up his mind, he felt a sudden, inexplicable melancholy. Just then, a guard entered the camp to report that a messenger had arrived from inside the city. Zhang Liao frowned and asked if the man's identity was confirmed. The guard replied that the messenger carried General Lu Bu's official seal. However, the messenger had only brought a verbal message. Zhang Liao nodded, noting that since Cao Cao's siege was so tight, breaking out of the city was nearly impossible. To prevent any leaks, a verbal message was indeed the only safe way. He ordered the man to be brought in. Moments later, Zhang Liao recognized the messenger standing before him as Li Tong, a soldier from General Gao Shun's camp. Li Tong bowed, stating he had come to deliver a message from his lord. Zhang Liao asked what Lu Bu had to say. Now, while Gao Shun and Qin Gong had already accepted Lu Bu as their master, Zhang Liao had always maintained a strictly professional relationship with him. He had never truly acknowledged Lu Bu as his sovereign. Thus, he still referred to him only as General Lu. The messenger, however, didn't care for such subtle distinctions. He delivered the message. The Lord says Cao Cao has the bearing of a great leader. After Xiapi falls, Wen Yuan, you may join him. If you still value our old friendship, bury my remains in Jiyuan. Zhang Liao was stunned. He had expected a desperate plea for a rescue mission, but this message left him in a heavy silence. After a long pause, he finally asked if General Lu had said anything else. Li Tong bowed again and added that the Lord had one more thing to say. If Zhang Liao found it too difficult to surrender, he could prepare his troops for one final battle. Tonight, at midnight, there would be a revolt. The plan was bold. The city would appear to surrender, drawing Cao Cao's forces toward the east gate, where Lu Bu would personally lead a charge. Meanwhile, Zhang Liao was to strike the enemy from behind. Success or failure rested on this single, desperate gamble. Of course, regardless of whether Zhang Liao agreed to help, Lu Bu intended to lead his men in a breakout at midnight. Li Tong had memorized these words perfectly, delivering the message with seamless conviction. After hearing this, Zhang Liao closed his eyes and fell into a long, deep silence. Finally, he turned to his personal guards and began to issue his orders. He spoke with a quiet authority that brooked no argument. With his mission complete, Li Tong was sent to rest, but only moments later, another man burst into the tent with frantic energy. It was Zhang Sun, who shouted that Zhang Liao had gone mad. Lu Bu was trapped in a lonely city, already a dead man walking. He argued they should simply wait for the city to fall and then surrender to Cao Cao. To launch a night raid now was surely a death sentence. In the entire camp, only his older brother, Zhang Sun, would dare to speak to him with such bluntness. Zhang Liao's expression remained stern as he told his brother his mind was made up. Zhang Sun grew more desperate, asking if Lu Bu was worth it. Was it truly worth sacrificing so many brothers just to save a man like that? Zhang Liao's voice was low and heavy as he replied. He didn't care about Lu Bu's life, but he couldn't ignore the 2,000 Bingzhou veterans in the city, men he had recruited himself. If Cao Cao's army stormed the city, what would become of those comrades? Zhang Sun called him a fool, insisting that Cao Cao only wanted Lu Bu dead. Once the leader was gone, the soldiers would surrender, and Zhang Liao could simply take them under his command. Zhang Liao admitted his brother's logic was sound, yet his resolve did not waver in the slightest. He believed a true man must choose his path. If Lu Bu had sent a messenger merely to beg for his own life, Zhang Liao would have ignored it. But the fact that Lu Bu first urged him to surrender before mentioning the breakout changed everything. That single gesture made Zhang Liao feel the gamble was worth it. After all, men of true talent usually possess a certain pride. While Zhang Liao had looked down on Lu Bu's past actions, this final display of selflessness had struck a chord deep within him. This tactic of retreating to advance wasn't exactly brilliant, but the timing was perfect. After all, if there's a chance to win, who would ever choose to surrender? Zhang Sun sighed, noting that the messenger's words were surely taught by Qin Gong. This little psychological game was designed specifically to trigger Zhang Liao's sense of loyalty. He asked if his brother was truly willing to die for Lu Bu. Zhang Liao replied that in the current state of the war, Cao Cao's army is overconfident in their victory, while the soldiers in the city will fight desperately just to stay alive. If tonight's battle is handled correctly, we might actually have a chance to win. Zhang Sun felt helpless, arguing that even a victory would only mean more running. In this freezing weather, how could they possibly continue a standoff with Cao Cao? Zhang Liao stood with his hands behind his back, looking steady. He remarked that the line between life and death is where character is truly forged. If they survive and General Lu Bu finally changes his ways, then risking everything tonight would be well worth it. We see that Zhang Liao had two main goals for choosing to help. First, he wanted to rescue his old comrades from Bingzhou. Second, he believed that if Lu Bu truly reformed, there was still a chance for a comeback. Surrendering to Cao Cao seems easy, but unless absolutely forced, who would willingly choose to be labeled a traitor to their master? Zhang Sun smiled bitterly, reminding him that from Chang'an to Shuzhou, Lu Bu has always been the same. What if this gamble fails? Zhang Liao remained calm, stating this would be the last time he helps him. His conscience would be clear. If Lu Bu refuses to change, they will simply take their troops and leave. In this vast world, there is always somewhere to go. It was now the night of December 25th. Inside the city of Xiapi, we find the residence of Ho Cheng. While the world outside was a frozen wasteland, as a high-ranking general, his living quarters were quite comfortable. In the banquet hall, several braziers were burning brightly, though Ho Cheng's expression remained gloomy. As he drank with Song Xian and Wei Su. A few days ago, Ho Cheng's precious horse had been recovered, and he had wanted to celebrate. Instead, he had been harshly punished by a short-tempered Lu Bu. In normal times, one might endure it, but look at the situation they're in. As soon as the floodwaters recede or the walls crumble, Cao Cao's army will swarm in. To be honest, this was the worst time for Lu Bu to play the tyrant. Ho Cheng was suffocating with resentment. Although Song Xian and Wei Su tried their best to console him, after a few cups of wine, his anger only intensified. He slammed his cup onto the table with a heavy thud, his teeth clenched in silent fury. He spat out that Lu Bu was an arrogant bully who had gone too far. If it weren't for the support of his brothers, Xiapi would have changed hands long ago, all over a little wine. He couldn't believe they were being punished for such a trivial matter, and this time, he refused to endure it. Song Xian urgently whispered for Ho Cheng to watch his words. We see that the city was crawling with spies, and many eyes were likely fixed on this very residence. If their secret drinking was reported, escaping Lu Bu's wrath this time would be nearly impossible. Among the three, Song Xian was the most cautious, and given Lu Bu's terrifying reputation, he was naturally on edge. Hearing Ho Cheng's drunken outbursts, he immediately tried to talk him down. But Ho Cheng scoffed, claiming his personal guards were all brothers who had faced death with him. Who would dare snitch? Wei Su's eyes flickered with a sharp light as he asked if Ho Cheng was merely venting his anger or if he truly couldn't take it anymore. It was a pointed question. As Wei Su joined the conversation, Ho Cheng's drunken haze seemed to lift instantly. He sharpened his focus, making it clear that this was far more than just angry talk. Everyone knew the desperate state of the city. Rather than waiting to be buried alongside Lu Bu when the walls finally fell, he suggested a different path. He proposed that they strike first to seize the initiative. If they surrendered the city to Cao Cao, regardless of the rewards, they would at least be able to keep their lives. He looked at his two companions, asking for their thoughts. Wei Su, his eyes still gleaming, asked exactly how he planned to move. Ho Cheng wasn't the only one who didn't want to die for a lost cause. Wei Su felt the same. Only a fool would throw away a chance to survive. Ho Cheng thought for a moment. For the past few days, Cao Cao's army had surrounded them without attacking, and the situation on the walls was quiet. Meanwhile, Lu Bu, that arrogant man, spent his days hiding in his manor, drinking and doing nothing. They could secretly send a messenger out of the city to coordinate with Cao Cao. The plan was to find a way to open the east gate at midnight. Once Cao Cao's army rushed in, and with the three of them acting as internal allies, the battle for Xiapi would be decided in an instant. Song Xian, ever the skeptic, worried that Cao Cao was known for being ruthless. It had been over 2 months since Cao Cao arrived in Shuzhou, and they had killed many of his soldiers. What if he refused to make a deal with them? After all, the walls wouldn't hold much longer anyway. Once they crumbled, Cao Cao could simply march his army into the city without their help. Ho Cheng grew irritated, asking if they should just sit around and wait for death instead. Wei Su spoke up, telling Song Xian that his logic was flawed. While the city would fall eventually, an earlier victory would allow Cao Cao to rest easy much sooner. To be honest, time is the most valuable currency in war. Furthermore, Cao Cao knew the combat strength of the Bingzhou army. Without them acting as insiders, even if the walls collapsed, the cost of entry would be high. Wei Su argued that even if the walls fell, Cao Cao would still lose thousands of lives to pacify the chaos. But with their help, Cao Cao's army could avoid those casualties entirely. Unless he were a fool, he would see the value in their offer. The three of them controlled at least half of the remaining 2,000 Bingzhou soldiers. To be honest, they held the real power. Only Gao Shun's camp might still follow Lu Bu's orders. Even if they couldn't defeat Gao Shun, they could certainly hold him off until the main army entered the city. What started as Ho Cheng venting his frustration had turned into a real conspiracy. Survival was now within their reach. Wei Su nodded, noting that it was his turn to guard the east gate that very night. He planned to head there immediately to send a trusted messenger to Cao Cao. Then, as midnight approached, the other two would bring their men straight to the gate. Their lives depended on tonight. Ho Cheng then turned to Song Xian, telling him coldly that they were now in a position where there was no turning back. If he joined them, they would all live. But if he remained stubborn, Ho Cheng warned him not to blame his brothers for being ruthless. As he spoke, 2 guards immediately stepped forward. Seeing the murderous looks on Ho Cheng and Wei Su's faces, Song Xian took a moment to think. He gritted his teeth and agreed to the plan. Since Lu Bu had shown them no mercy, they owed him no loyalty in return. We see that Ho Chung and Wei Su were dangerous men. They had shared their entire plan, and Song Xian knew he couldn't leave the residence alive if he refused. More importantly, Song Xian harbored his own deep resentments toward Lu Bu, despite his timid nature. Since things had come to this, he decided it was worth the risk. Ho Chung smiled, praising him as a brother he could count on. He urged them to move quickly before anything could go wrong. With the plan settled, Ho Chung and Song Xian began deploying their trusted men, while Wei Su hurried toward the east gate. 15 minutes later, back at the main manor, we find Lu Bu and Chun Gong sitting together. Suddenly, Gao Shun rushed in to report that Ho Chung and Wei Su had finally begun their move. Lu Bu nodded, asking if the city was secure and where exactly the traders were headed. Gao Shun assured him that everything was prepared. He had personally arranged the defenses so that no one would notice a thing. After leaving Ho Cheng's residence, Wei Su headed straight for the east gate, likely intending to establish contact with the enemy forces outside. Meanwhile, Ho Chung and Song Xian split up to gather their most trusted men. But our scouts had been watching them all along. They couldn't escape Lu Bu's control. He rose slowly, ready to act. He decided they would follow the plan. Once that east gate opened, they would give Cao Cao's army a very warm welcome. Gao Shun's leadership was formidable, and with Chun Gong's strategic mind assisting him, the counterattack against Cao Cao was finally set in motion. Gao Shun prepared to engage Wei Su in fierce combat, with fire traps already set, driving the rebels out of the gate. Wouldn't be difficult. Once Cao Cao noticed the chaos at the east gate, he would surely lead his main force to seize it. At that moment, Chun Gong would order the west, south, and north gates to be thrown wide open. When the news reached the enemy camp, Cao Cao would likely assume Lu Bu was trying to escape through the confusion. To prevent that, he would have to split his forces to block those three gates, thinning his numbers outside the east gate significantly. Then, Gao Shun would charge out with his elite camp, while Zhang Liao struck from the rear. This pincer movement would surely crush them. Of course, Cao Cao was a master of war, and with advisors like Guijia by his side, success wasn't guaranteed. But at this stage, it was time for a desperate gamble. Gao Shun bowed and withdrew. As midnight approached, a bitter north wind howled around the east gate under a deep, dark sky. It was late December, and the weather was cold enough to turn water into ice. On the exposed city walls, dozens of Bingzhou soldiers huddled together, shivering, staring into the endless night outside the city. Wei Su felt his anxiety growing by the second. Since he was in command of the gate tonight, sending a secret messenger to Cao Cao had been easy enough. Yet, nearly an hour had passed, and the messenger hadn't returned. He wondered if Cao Cao had actually rejected his surrender. Just as Wei Su's mind began to spiral, he suddenly heard a faint, rhythmic sound coming from the darkness outside. He snapped to attention immediately and ordered his personal guards to lower the basket and pull the man up. To avoid any suspicion, Wei Su's trusted aide had secretly rappelled down the wall to deliver the message to Cao Cao's camp. Now, returning to report, he had to travel on foot without even a torch, using only bird calls to signal his arrival. The guards pulled him up in moments, and the messenger gasped out that Cao Cao had accepted their surrender. Wei Su was overjoyed. He eagerly asked if the great General Cao had any specific instructions for their next move. The plan was simple. They were to open the gates and destroy the winches to prevent the heavy portcullis from dropping. Once the gate was secured, they were to light fires on both sides as a signal for the main army to charge. Wei Su nodded, ordering his men to open the gates and sabotage the mechanisms immediately. To be honest, there was no turning back now. He then sent word to Ho Chung and Song Xian, urging them to bring their troops to the east gate for support. Since the east gate was manned mostly by Wei Su's loyalists, the few who might have resisted couldn't cause much trouble. The real challenge for Wei Su would be holding the gate long enough for Cao Cao's forces to actually arrive. We know that Gao Shun's elite camp were essentially perfect killing machines. They would surely rush to reclaim the gate once they noticed the betrayal. To stand a chance against such elites, Wei Su knew he needed the combined strength of Ho Chung and Song Xian. Meanwhile, at the main military camp, Ho Chung and Song Xian were already leading hundreds of soldiers toward the east gate. Of the 5,000 troops in the city, most were stationed right there in the central barracks, resting for the night. The 3,000 Shuzhou soldiers weren't much of a threat, and our two commanders weren't particularly worried about them. However, Gao Shun's elite camp was also stationed in that very same barracks. Slipping away under their noses was no easy task. So, they decided to be bold, marching their troops out openly toward the east gate with a rather convenient excuse. They claimed that since a fire had broken out at the east gate, they were simply heading there to suppress a potential rebellion. Under the deep night sky, their torches gathered like a glowing dragon, but before they could reach the gate, they saw a sudden flash of light. Below them, a figure sat firmly atop the red hare horse, holding the heaven-piercer halberd and blocking the path. This sudden sight terrified Song Xian so much he nearly fell from his saddle in shock. Fortunately, Ho Chung managed to steady his nerves, quickly spurring his horse forward to address the man. "My lord, the city. Patrols report a massive fire at the east gate, and the gates are wide open. It seems rebels are preparing to surrender the city." You simply looked at them and asked if that was why they had gathered all their men to support the east gate. Ho Chung clasped his hands and replied, "Yes, my lord." "Ciao." Chao's main camp is right outside that gate. If we arrive too late, we fear we won't be able to save it. You asked coldly why, if this was a rescue. They had brought so few men. What about the Shujo troops back at the barracks? Ho Chung replied urgently, My lord, have you forgotten? Only you can mobilize the Shujo army. We simply don't have the authority to command them. We haven't noticed it before, but Ho Chung is quite the actor. To be honest, the original host of this body might have been fooled by those few words. You spoke slowly, explaining that the fire at the East Gate was actually started by Wei Su on your direct orders. Its primary purpose was to create a diversion, luring Cao Cao's army into an attack. Furthermore, it was a clever trap to see exactly who in the city was truly a traitor waiting to welcome the enemy. While Ho Chung and Song Xian were undoubtedly doomed, the soldiers under their command were the elite of the elite. Finding a way to keep them loyal to you was the real goal here. Upon hearing your explanation, Ho Cheng's expression immediately filled with suspicion. Before he could react, you told them that the East Gate was already handled and they should return to the barracks. General Ho, General Song, come with me first to discuss our military strategy. Now, Ho Cheng might have been slow to catch on, but he wasn't a complete fool. He knew that if he sent his men away and followed you alone to discuss strategy, there was no way he would come out alive. In a moment of desperation, Ho Chung raised his spear and roared, Lu Bu, you old rogue, you deserve to die. Well, he certainly didn't stay calm for long. You asked him coldly, Ho Chung, are you planning to rebel? Ho Chung gritted his teeth and shouted, You were heartless first, so don't blame us for being disloyal. Brothers, if you want to live today, follow me and fight your way out of the city. Both Ho Chung and Song Xian were veterans of the Bingzhou army, and among their ranks, there were more than a few loyal followers. Stirred by Ho Cheng's cry, over 100 soldiers immediately began to move. As they dared to step forward, Lu Bu leveled his halberd and shouted that since Ho Chung and Song Xian had chosen rebellion, they must die. He told the soldiers that if they had been deceived, they should step back now and be spared, but if they were truly committed to treason, they would have to answer to his halberd first. To be honest, his reputation alone was enough to make any man tremble. Ever since Ding Yuan's death, Lu Bu had been the undisputed leader of the Bingzhou army, possessing a ferocity that even Gao Shun and Zhang Liao lacked. Under his terrifying gaze, half of the 100 loyalists standing beside Ho Chung and Song Xian immediately began to retreat in fear. Ho Chung and Song Xian exchanged a desperate look, gritted their teeth, and spurred their horses forward. There was no turning back now. They knew that a final, frantic charge might offer a slim hope of survival, whereas surrendering would mean certain death on the spot. Seeing them choose to fight to the bitter end, Lu Bu let out a cold laugh and charged forward to meet them. Did they really think they stood a chance? He wasn't just a soul inhabiting this body. He had inherited Lu Bu's legendary martial prowess, and he wasn't alone. Gao Shun was right beside him. With the elite trap camp soldiers following close behind, Ho Chung and Song Xian's charge looked brave, but it was ultimately a suicide mission. In what seemed like a mere heartbeat, the two rebels and their remaining followers were cut down and wiped out completely. And that, as they say, was the end of that little uprising. Lu Bu then ordered the 3,000 Shujo troops in the camp to flee through the west, south, and north gates, but never the east gate. Anyone attempting to use the east gate would be executed. He knew these Shujo soldiers held absolutely no loyalty toward him whatsoever. If Cao Cao's army attacked, they would likely turn on him from within, so it was better to let them scatter and save themselves now. This chaos would serve as a perfect smokescreen, making Cao Cao believe that Lu Bu himself might be hiding among the fleeing crowds. Upon hearing these instructions, Gao Shun gave a quick salute and hurried off to make the arrangements. Within moments, the quiet camp erupted. It was like a boiling pot overflowing. Some soldiers rushed home in a panic, while others raided the granaries to grab whatever food they could carry. However, the vast majority of the troops simply sprinted toward the 3 open gates. We should note that these men didn't just dislike Lu Bu. They had no love for Cao Cao either, remembering how he had once ravaged Shujo to avenge the death of his father, Cao Song. The memory of the city's corpses clogging the rivers like a dam was still fresh. Tonight, they decided to let Lu Bu and Cao Cao fight it out while they simply saved themselves. Out on the wilderness east of Xiapi, we see the city gates flickering with constant firelight as soldiers rush forward with everything they have. Cao Cao let out a booming laugh, noting that everything was unfolding exactly as Feng Xiao had predicted, and that the situation in Xiapi was now reaching its end. He declared that Lu Bu was as good as dead and issued a grim order. No sword was to be sheathed before dawn, and the soldiers were permitted to loot the city. Because of his father Cao Song's death, Cao Cao held no affection for the noble families or the common people of Shujo, so he allowed his men this reward. To be honest, this was actually a major concession on his part. If he hadn't been worried about the reaction of allies like Qin Deng, he might have ordered a total massacre. Just as Cao Cao was issuing these commands, Cao Hong suddenly galloped in from the distance to report some urgent news from the front lines. Scouts had discovered that besides the east gate, the west, south, and north gates had all been thrown open, and many enemy soldiers were currently wading through the water to escape. In the pitch-black night, however, it was impossible to see which gate Lu Bu himself was using, causing Cao Cao to pause for a brief moment of reflection. He quickly ordered 1,000 troops to be dispatched to guard each of the 3 gates, while also telling Zai to keep the cavalry ready for action. The plan was simple. The moment Lu Bu's trail was spotted, they were to hunt him down and kill him immediately. As the arrangements were being made, Guojia suddenly frowned, pointing out that 5,000 men were already tied up guarding the supplies in the main camp. If they split another 3,000 men for the gates and kept Zai's cavalry out of the main fight, their numbers would start to look a bit thin. He worried that their actual siege force would drop below 10,000 men, and given Lu Bu's legendary martial skill, a desperate breakout attempt might actually succeed. Deep down, he feared they might not be able to hold him back, but Cao Cao confidently told Feng Xiao that he was overthinking the matter. Cao Cao argued that the fact that all the gates were open proved the 3,000 Shuzhou troops in the city were already scattering in a panic. He believed that even if the elite trapped camp were veteran warriors, a 10-to-1 advantage meant they were already in an unbeatable position. Although Guojia still felt something was slightly off, he couldn't find any obvious flaws in the logic after turning it over in his mind once more. Chao Ren chimed in, remarking that Lu Bu had always been all brawn and no brains. With the gates open, his fate was surely sealed tonight. However, we should note that except for the East Gate, the areas around the city were still flooded, making it difficult for a large army to move if Wei or Su appeared. Cao Cao laughed, asking how they could possibly wait for his army to enter the city when his forces were attacking while the enemy was merely defending. He argued that the moment those gates swung open, the enemy lost all their defenses, and as for Wei Su and Ho Cheng, those fools were of little consequence. Expecting them to secretly open the gates and destroy the portcullis was enough. To truly break the army and take the city, he relied on his own soldiers. If the city's defenses were still intact, Cao Cao would never have led a direct assault, but now, with all 4 gates wide open, the situation had changed. With the city in total chaos and his heavy troops advancing directly, he wondered how Lu Bu could possibly avoid defeat, even if the gates were contested. A fierce battle was inevitable, of course, but Cao Cao had absolute confidence in the men under his command as he watched the scene unfold. Seeing that his lord had made up his mind, Chao Ren cupped his fists in respect, while Cao Cao turned to Eugene, who was standing nearby, to give his orders. He told Eugene, also known as Wenza, that the command of tonight's siege would be in his hands, though he could have easily given it to Chao Ren. In Cao Cao's eyes, Eugene led his troops with a meticulous, watertight precision that was rare even among the famous generals of the Han era. Believing Eugene to be the steadier choice for the command, he watched as the general cupped his fists, gripped his long spear, and flipped onto his horse. Eugene galloped toward the East Gate. We should remember that he originally came to Cao Cao through a recommendation after his former master died in battle. Despite this connection, when compared to the Chao and Xiahou family brothers, Eugene was ultimately seen as something of an outsider in the inner circle. Even compared to generals like Su Chu or Eugene, he wasn't among the very first group of warriors to pledge their loyalty to Cao Cao's cause. Perhaps because of this, Eugene worked harder than any other general in the army, maintaining a strict and disciplined approach to leading his troops. His laws were rigorous and his personal conduct was beyond reproach, which earned him a deep level of trust from Cao Cao for tonight's mission. By putting Eugene in charge of the main assault, Cao Cao wasn't just trusting his ability, he also wanted to help him accumulate the merit needed for promotion. Excluding the guards left at the main camp and those lying in ambush at the other gates, Eugene had a total of 8,000 men at his disposal. More than half of these, about 5,000, were surrendered troops from Shuzhou, while the remaining 3,000 were Cao Cao's true elite forces. To break through the gates as quickly as possible, the best arrangement would naturally be to put the elites in front and let the surrendered troops follow. However, Eugene understood the situation perfectly and knew that such a simple plan might not be the most effective way to handle the coming slaughter. Deep down, Cao Cao had no desire to waste his own elite troops, so for tonight's raid, Eugene decisively placed the 5,000 Shuzhou soldiers in the front. The 3,000 elites were kept in the rear as backup, while atop the east gate of Xiapi, the pressure from the approaching army grew heavier by the second. Wei Su felt his heart racing with excitement. As long as Cao Cao's army entered smoothly, the rewards would be immense, or at the very least, he wouldn't die. He had no intention of being buried alongside Lu Bu, but unfortunately, before the main army arrived, Gao Shun and his camp crushers reached the east gate first. Wei Su had only a few hundred soldiers under his command, and they were no match for the wolf-like camp crushers, who overran them in a matter of moments. His men cried out that they couldn't hold the line, suggesting that since Cao Cao's army was already outside and the portcullis destroyed, they should flee. Wei Su gritted his teeth and asked where Ho Cheng and Song Xian were, wondering why neither of them had appeared to support him. His subordinates feared that since Gao Shun was here in person, the other two had likely been executed. Otherwise, the camp crushers wouldn't be so numerous. Watching his inner circle dwindle while Gao Shun drew closer, Wei Su realized his time was running out as the enemy commander advanced like a force of nature. Finally, Wei Su barked the order to retreat outside the city. He knew that while staying to welcome Cao Cao would bring more merit, his life was more important. Gao Shun was already seeing red, and Wei Su knew that if he stayed a moment longer, he wouldn't live to see any of the rewards he had been promised. After all, what use is merit to a dead man? At his shout, the remaining 100 loyalists immediately abandoned their posts and fled the city gates. In an instant, the area around the east gate became eerily empty until Gao Shun's voice rang out, ordering the first squad to clear the battlefield. They moved the rebel corpses out of the gateway, while the second squad prepared the assault wagons to charge the moment the enemy drew near. At his command, the tangled mess of rebel bodies was cleared away, and 6 assault wagons were brought forward, ready for the coming impact. These assault wagons were actually modified carriages, reinforced with thick wooden planks on the roof and the front for maximum protection. Several sharpened logs were lashed to the front, their points jutting forward like the quills of a giant, angry porcupine. The entrance to the east gate was only about 20 feet wide, meaning only 2 wagons could drive side by side at any given time. Because of this, the 6 wagons were arranged in 3 rows of 2, each pulled by a pair of sturdy horses prepared for the chaos. To protect the animals from enemy arrows, they had been draped in layers of thick cloth armor, and as for the 6 drivers responsible for the charge, the 6 soldiers driving them were also clad in heavy armor, as the terrain near the city gate was far too narrow for a traditional cavalry charge. Because of this, the mission for these assault wagons was to push forward with everything they had to open a path, while outside, the enemy drew closer. Inside the city, the soldiers stood ready with grim expressions as Gao Shun asked his commander how he thought the enemy would arrange their forces. Gao Shun noted that for Cao Cao's army, the most critical task tonight was to break into the city as quickly as possible. In a normal battle, the elites would lead while the common soldiers followed, but Cao Cao had too few elites to risk them so early. Furthermore, Gao Shun believed that Cao Cao didn't fully trust the surrendered Shuzhou troops, so he would likely place them in the front lines. The Shuzhou soldiers would take the brunt of the impact, while the elite Cao troops stayed in the rear to maintain order and apply pressure. His commander nodded, realizing Cao Cao didn't just distrust the Shuzhou men. He simply valued one of his own elites over 3 of theirs. It was a cold calculation, and as predicted, the layout of the approaching army matched Gao Shun's expectations perfectly as they neared the gate. Seeing the vanguard was only about 100 feet from the entrance, Eugene sat high on his horse and barked out his orders for the shield bearers. He commanded the shield bearers to raise their defenses and move forward, while the longbowmen scattered to the left and right for cover. The moat had already been filled in by Cao Cao's men, so the advancing troops met no obstacles as they rushed forward under Eugene's command. Over 100 shield bearers split into 3 teams, crouching low behind their protection as they charged toward the dark opening of the gate. As for Wei Su's defeated remnants, they had already scattered in all directions the moment they cleared the city walls, leaving the path open. Inside the gate, seeing the enemy had reached the threshold, Gao Shun remained calm and gave the order for the assault wagons to advance. The 6 wagons, arranged in their 3 rows, thundered directly into the gateway, while the enemy outside remained completely blind to the trap. It wasn't until the first 2 wagons were right in their faces that the Cao soldiers finally saw what was coming, but by then, it was far too late. Desperate cries to retreat rang out as they realized they couldn't stop the momentum, urging the rear ranks to turn back toward the open field. The space inside the gateway was cramped, and the wagons were moving with terrifying speed, leaving the shield bearers with nowhere to run. Under the crushing force of the 6 wagons, the vanguard was utterly devastated, with some soldiers being impaled instantly by the wooden spikes. Some were struck by the heavy frames and trampled instantly, and within moments, the entire gateway was filled with the agonizing cries of the fallen. The 6 assault wagons thundered through, giving Cao Cao's shield bearers no chance to retreat as they surged out from the darkness of the tunnel. Even after clearing the gate, their momentum remained unbroken. Over a dozen shield bearers were crushed instantly, while the survivors scrambled for their lives. Their formation was utterly shattered in their desperate attempt to avoid the wagons, leaving the ranks of spearmen behind them completely exposed. The Cao army commander in charge of the spearmen watched in horror as the 6 wagons bore down on his position with terrifying speed. Though his heart was racing, he had to bite the bullet and barked orders for the archers to fire while commanding his spearmen to hold the line. He shouted that anyone retreating without orders would be executed on the spot, for Cao Cao's military law was notoriously unforgiving during active combat. We see the chaos unfolding. The officer who had been leading the shield bearers was already dead, crushed under the wheels of the lead wagon. In the narrow confines of the gateway, retreat had been the only option, but out here in the open, the spearmen had more room to maneuver. He figured that even if they couldn't stop the wagons head-on, they could at least try to circle them, because retreating now meant certain death. If he fled, Eugene's executioners in the rear would cut him down long before Cao even heard the news, so he forced his men forward. Under his desperate command, the archers on the flanks unleashed a hail of arrows, but the wagons were heavily reinforced with thick wooden planks. The arrows simply bounced off the timber, unable to penetrate the cabins where the drivers sat safely protected by their own heavy armor. The soldiers inside basically ignored the incoming fire, and seeing that the bows were useless, the remaining spearmen lunged forward with their weapons. They tried desperately to unseat the drivers, but the wooden spikes lashed to the sides of the wagons were longer than any spear they carried. Before they could even reach the horses, they were impaled by the protruding spikes, and in an instant, the army outside the gate fell into total disarray. Inside the city, Lu Bu sat tall upon his horse, watching the enemy's formation crumble exactly as he had envisioned it would. Seeing the opening, he raised his sky-piercer halberd and roared to his men that today they would find victory or death on the battlefield. He commanded them to follow him into the fray, knowing that while the wagons were devastating in narrow gaps, they were less effective in the open field. To be honest, the wagons would soon lose their tactical advantage, so he had to strike now while the enemy was still reeling from the initial shock. We see that the perfect moment to strike is when the enemy formation is in total chaos, and with a single command, Lu Bu leads the charge himself. The soldiers of his elite camp are the best of the best, and seeing their commander galloping at the front, not a single one is willing to lag behind. As they surge out of the city gate, Lu Bu swings his sky-piercer halberd in wide arcs, cutting down Cao Cao's shield-bearers and spearmen by the dozen. The former Shuzhou soldiers, now serving Cao Cao, are well aware of Lu Bu's terrifying strength and the sheer ferocity of his elite warriors. In this desperate breakout, few dare to stand in his way, especially as more and more elite soldiers pour out from the city gates behind him. The defected Shuzhou troops are forced back step by step, while deep within the main Chao army formation, Eugene watches the battle unfold with intense focus. All 4 gates of Xiapi have been opened, meaning a breakout could happen anywhere, making the situation quite unpredictable for the besiegers. However, since Eugene isn't responsible for the west, south, or north gates, he secretly hopes that the main escape attempt happens right here at the east gate. He tells himself that if he can capture or kill Lu Bu on the spot, his prestige among Cao Cao's generals will skyrocket instantly. Seeing that Lu Bu truly is breaking out from the east, Eugene's heart races with excitement as he barks orders for his spearmen to fight to the death. He commands them to pin down the enemy, while the archers fan out to the flanks to pick off the riders, urging the rear ranks to push forward. He coordinates his shield-bearers and spearmen to move as one, while sending an urgent message to General Cao Chun to bring the cavalry for support. Cao Chun commands 1,000 riders, the only mobile force Cao Cao has left here, and he would have remained in the rear if Lu Bu hadn't appeared. Now that the breakout at the east gate is undeniable, these 1,000 cavalrymen are exactly what is needed to close the trap. Under Eugene's direction, the frontline Shuzhou conscripts fight desperately, while the elite Chao reinforcements rush forward with shields and spears at the ready. The battlefield becomes a bloody blur of steel and grit. Lu Bu strikes down a shield-bearer with a single thrust before turning to his commander, Gao Shun. He instructs Gao Shun to lead the elite camp brothers straight through the center, while the cavalry handles the slaughter on the left and right flanks. Gao Shun bows his head in respect, noting that while their men are strong, they are vastly outnumbered by an enemy nearly 10 times their size. He worries that if they get bogged down in a prolonged fight, the enemy might eventually surround them, which would be a disaster, to say the least. In Gao Shun's mind, since the enemy's front line has already crumbled, they must maintain their momentum and keep moving forward. He knows that right now, the priority is to keep moving, as there is no cover outside Xiapi's walls even if they manage to break out. Without logistics or supplies, his brothers would eventually freeze or starve, so this continued struggle with the enemy serves a specific purpose. We see that he wants to lure the enemy cavalry in, creating an opening for Zhang Liao, who commands 1,000 riders and 1,000 infantry. The infantry are far too slow to arrive in time for tonight's battle, but if Zhang Liao leads only his 1,000 cavalry to assist, Cao Chun will undoubtedly lead his own riders to intercept them once he receives the news. At least, that is the plan. Deep down, Lu Bu is certain that once the Chao commanders see him breaking out from the east, they will commit Cao Chun's entire cavalry force. And once those riders are committed to this fight, they won't be able to stop Zhang Liao. Gao Shun cups his fists, ready to obey. On the battlefield, we see Gao Shun leading his elite camp warriors in a full-throttle charge, while the Shuzhou defectors fail to hold them back. Under Gao Shun's relentless assault, the ground is quickly littered with the fallen. Meanwhile, a scout rushes into the main Chao formation. The scout reports that the front lines are collapsing, but Eugene coldly orders the execution squads to move to the front. He declares that anyone attempting to flee is to be beheaded on the spot without trial. To be honest, his ruthlessness is quite chilling. Until Cao Chun's cavalry arrives, these men must die in the enemy's path, serving as nothing more than human obstacles to slow them down. The ultimate goal tonight is to capture or kill Lu Bu. As for whether 1,000 or 2,000 Shuzhou conscripts die, Eugene truly doesn't care. Upon hearing the commander's cold-blooded orders, the messengers immediately race out to spread the word to the ranks. The execution squads move forward, shouting that anyone who retreats will be cut down instantly. It is a desperate way to hold a line. After several rounds of these harsh commands, the executioners brandish their heavy blades and step forward. Meanwhile, Lu Bu leads his riders in a fierce melee. To be perfectly honest, the combat effectiveness of these Shujo defectors is mediocre at best. They are barely holding on. If it weren't for Yujin's execution squads watching their every move from behind, they likely would have scattered and fled long ago. The fear of the blade behind them is the only thing keeping them facing the terror in front of them. Suddenly, Lu Bu spots a familiar face and his rage boils over, cursing the traitors and vowing that tonight, the father and son will pay. The man standing before him is Chun Deng, one of the key figures who helped Cao Cao take control of Shujo. We see that when Lu Bu first discovered the betrayal, he immediately threw Chun Gui and Chun Deng's 3 younger brothers into the Great Dungeon. Although the 3 brothers were eventually smuggled out by allies, their father, Chun Gui, was not so lucky. In a fit of holy rage, Lu Bu had him beheaded and his head displayed on the city walls for 3 days. Since then, Chun Deng has been waiting for the city to fall so he could claim his revenge. Cao Cao, worried that Chun Deng might do something reckless, had actually ordered him to stay behind and guard the main camp during tonight's raid. Unfortunately, Chun Deng decided to ignore those military orders. He slipped away on his own, and now, seeing his father's killer right before his eyes and hearing Lu Bu's taunts, Chun Deng's blood boils with fury. He grips his spear and charges forward with desperate intensity. We learn that Chun Deng was a scholar official who first served as the magistrate of Danyang. Later, Tao Qian promoted him to agricultural colonel. After Tao Qian's death, Chun Deng had originally intended to support Liu Bei in governing Shujo. But when Yuan Shu attacked Shujo and Lu Bu was asked for help, Lu Bu exerted a bit too much force and simply seized most of the province for himself. From then on, Chun Deng was nominally Lu Bu's subordinate, though the Chun family always looked down on him. To be honest, they never truly accepted him. Seeing that Liu Bei couldn't hold power either, they chose to secretly defect to Cao Cao. Chun Deng himself is skilled in both letters and martial arts. As a vital figure among the Shujo gentry, Cao Cao treats him with great respect, yet Chun Deng's obsession with revenge meant he couldn't stay in camp. On the battlefield, Chun Deng draws closer and closer. Lu Bu raises his long spear horizontally, preparing a devastating overhead strike to split him apart. While Chun Deng's martial skill isn't weak, in the eyes of the world's greatest warrior, he is simply outmatched. It is a harsh reality to face. Under the weight of that single blow, the spear in Chun Deng's hand snaps instantly. Before he can even process what has happened, Lu Bu spins his spear and delivers a lightning-fast forward thrust. The distance between them is already incredibly short, making the strike nearly impossible to dodge. Chun Deng realizes he cannot escape completely, so he desperately twists his body, hoping to protect his vital organs from the incoming steel. However, Lu Bu's killing moves are not so easily avoided. Although Chun Deng manages to narrowly move his heart out of the direct path of the blade, the spear still bites deep into his chest. It is a brutal consequence for his impulsive charge into a duel he could never win. With his weapon shattered and his body wounded, Chun Deng's thoughts of bloody revenge vanish, replaced by the cold instinct to survive as he retreats. Dropping his broken spear, he wheels his horse around to flee. After all, with the city falling tonight, Lu Bu is already a dead man, and there is no need for him to sacrifice his own life here. Seeing Chun Deng attempt to escape, Lu Bu lets out a cold sneer, thrusts his long spear into the ground, and reaches for the longbow on his back. He draws the string back until it is as round as a full moon, and with a sharp whistle, the arrow finds its mark. Chun Deng, having barely fled 10 paces, is struck down, falling from his horse and dying on the spot. On a battlefield this chaotic, Chun Deng's death is merely a small interlude. After shooting him down, Lu Bu continues to lead his cavalry in a fierce forward charge. It is at this moment that Cao Chun arrives, leading his own elite unit of horsemen into the fray. However, Cao Chun is no fool. He has no intention of challenging Lu Bu in a reckless duel. Instead, he stays on the perimeter, directing his riders to entangle the enemy cavalry on the left and right flanks. Gao Shun's camp crushers are formidable, but as infantry, they simply cannot outrun the horses. As long as the battle remains a stalemate, Cao Cao's forces can afford the losses, knowing they will eventually trap everyone in a single net. To be honest, it is a grim numbers game. Since the army first charged out of the city, the battle has raged for nearly an hour. Although the Cao army's formations have been battered and scattered, their sheer numbers are overwhelming. Under Yujin's steady command from the center, they continue to fight without pause. Meanwhile, Cao Chun's cavalry units continue their relentless weaving and piercing attacks, guarding the perimeter to ensure Lu Bu's soldiers have no chance to break the encirclement. The casualties among Gao Shun's elite camp crushers have already exceeded 300 men. In any other army, such heavy losses would have caused the formation to collapse long ago. Fortunately, with both Lu Bu and Gao Shun present, the line barely manages to hold. After piercing through another enemy soldier, A breathless Gao Shun calls out, admitting that if Zhang Liao doesn't arrive soon, they will likely meet their end right here. Lu Bu simply looks toward the distant horizon. Life and death are in the hands of fate, and the siege of Xiapi was always a desperate gamble with slim odds of survival. If Zhang Liao is willing to lead his troops here, it would be for the best. If not, there is nothing more to be done. Within the main Chao army formation, Eugene is watching the unfolding battle with absolute focus. He knows that if they successfully capture or kill Lu Bu tonight, his own reputation will be cemented forever. Seeing the enemy grow weary, Eugene coldly orders his messengers to command the entire army to close in and ensure Lu Bu does not escape. The command echoes across the field. The general orders the army to surround them. Do not let Lu Bu escape. Following Eugene's signal, the Chao soldiers find a second wind. Pushing forward with renewed desperation, Cao Cao governs his military with strict discipline, never failing to reward merit or punish failure. And so, the battle for Xiapi, which began in October, continues. For the soldiers, this night represents the final chance to harvest military merit. Even if they cannot fell Lu Bu, they are determined to take down as many enemies as possible. Behind the massive Chao army formation, we see Cao Cao himself standing atop a high platform, his gaze fixed on the front as his troops suddenly push forward with all their might. Cao Cao laughs, declaring that the brute Lu Bu will surely be captured tonight. With all four walls of Xiapi now completely breached, leading an army out of the city means there is no path for retreat. If Lu Bu could break through, that would be one thing, but here at the East Gate, his forces have been delayed too long to break Eugene's encirclement. From the current situation, he is utterly finished, or so it seems. However, in contrast to Cao Cao's optimism, Wu Jia does not share the same confidence, admitting to his lord that he still feels a sense of unease. Cao Cao simply laughs, noting that the gates are open and their forces are closing in just a few moments. Lu Bu will either be dead or a prisoner. He asks what there is to fear. Wu Jia frowns, pointing out that when the East Gate first opened, Lu Bu had a perfect opportunity to break out with all his strength. Yet, instead of seizing that chance, he brought the camp crushers and his personal cavalry to engage in a massive brawl at the gate. After much thought, Wu Jia is certain something is wrong here. Cao Cao argues that after Wei Su opened the gates, their army rushed to the East Gate immediately. Though the Shuzhou rebels have mediocre combat power, they have the advantage of numbers. Lu Bu might be able to flee on horseback alone, but he still has the soldiers of the camp crushers to consider. Furthermore, his own family is still inside the city. If he cannot drive back Cao Cao's army, how could his men and his family possibly escape? Wu Jia speaks solemnly, noting that this is exactly the problem. Given Lu Bu's nature, in such a desperate situation, he would normally prioritize his own life, thinking only of taking his family and carving a path to escape. Yet, the scouts have seen no sign of his family at all. Instead, this man Lu Bu has stayed outside the gate, locked in a fierce struggle with their army. As Wu Jia speaks, Cao Cao's expression changes drastically. He realizes what is being suggested, that Lu Bu is intentionally lingering at the East Gate to draw their main force and cavalry units to this single point while waiting for reinforcements. Wu Jia nods, fearing this is the case. Cao Cao frowns, noting that currently, only Yuan Shu has the power to rescue Lu Bu, setting aside whether Yuan Shu is even willing to send troops. Even if he did, they could never evade the eyes and ears of the scouts. Near Xiapi, there are simply no other allies Lu Bu can rely on. Is there really no other force he can rely on? As the thought strikes them, Cao Cao and Wu Jia lock eyes and speak a single name in unison, Zhang Liao. Just as the words leave their lips, Cao Ren arrives in a frantic gallop, reporting that Zhang Liao has led 1,000 cavalrymen to strike directly at their rear. The soldiers cannot hold them back, and the entire formation is on the verge of collapse. Cao Cao cries out in fury, cursing Zhang Liao for ruining his plans. He is absolutely livid, and who could blame him? In this campaign for Shuzhou, Cao Cao had 3 primary strategic goals. First, to capture and kill Lu Bu. Second, to occupy the entire Shuzhou territory. And third, to gain the support of the local elite families to stabilize the region. He was on the very brink of achieving everything in a single stroke, but his own arrogance, his desire to force Zhang Liao's surrender, has led to this disaster. Deep down, Cao Cao has come to utterly loathe Zhang Liao, but with the situation turning critical, he cannot afford to wallow in self-pity. He immediately issues a command for Eugene to lead the troops in a fighting retreat, pulling everyone back to the safety of the main camp. Su Chu looks on with clear reluctance, arguing that while Zhang Liao's cavalry charge is fierce, they still have the upper hand. He believes they can still break the enemy. To be honest, he simply doesn't want to let a victory slip through his fingers. Is it not a waste to retreat now? Cao Cao shakes his head, noting that the combat power of Gao Shun's camp crushers is simply too high. Earlier, they only managed to surround them because of their superior numbers. If they weren't so desperate to seize the city, they wouldn't even dare to engage Lu Bu. Now, with Zhang Liao striking the rear, the units stationed at the other 3 gates cannot possibly return in time to reinforce them. If their main force collapses here, a single wrong move could jeopardize the entire main camp. It is a risk he is not willing to take. And so, the battle for tonight ends here. He orders Eugene to retreat immediately, reasoning that Lu Bu still has very few soldiers at his disposal. If Lu Bu hides in Xiapi, he at least has walls for protection, but once he breaks out into the open wilderness, where can he possibly hide? Even if he carries some supplies, they won't last long. As long as Cao Cao's main army remains intact, Lu Bu can forget about ever reclaiming Shuzhou. Cao Cao wants Lu Bu dead more than anyone, but he is a seasoned commander who refuses to let a temporary setback create a fatal opening. Seeing that Cao Cao has made up his mind, Cao Ren gallops off at once to deliver the orders to the front lines. Half an hour later, the city of Xiapi falls silent once more. The Cao army, which arrived with such fury, has vanished just as quickly. Behind them, they leave a landscape littered with the fallen. 10 miles outside the city of Xiapi, after more than an hour of frantic activity, the families of the soldiers have finally gathered. Most have made it out of the city. To be honest, calling them families is a bit of a stretch, as many were women taken by the soldiers during Dong Zhuo's rampages in Luoyang and Chang'an. Some were willing to follow their husbands anywhere, while others took advantage of the chaos in the city to flee long ago. And then, there were those who weren't so lucky. A number of them were killed by Cao Cao's troops during the breach and never made it out at all. Beyond the people, if they hope to survive while fleeing from Cao Cao, they need supplies. Food is essential, so despite the exhaustion of battle, Lu Bu personally leads Gao Shun and Zhang Liao to secure the granaries. We see them working tirelessly to move the grain out. As for the supplies they simply cannot carry, they set them ablaze, leaving nothing but ashes behind. Yes, it's a scorched earth policy, but they have little choice. After all, they can no longer stay in the Shuzhou region. As for what the civilians and the remnants of the Shuzhou army will eat, well, that is a problem for Cao Cao to solve. As the sky begins to turn a pale gray, the families and grain are finally ready. It is then that Lu Bu instructs Gao Shun to bring Chun Gong and Zhang Liao together for a council. Our story finds the Cao army defeated and licking its wounds from last night. They won't have the strength for another major assault anytime soon. At most, they will send out scouts to track their movements, so there is no immediate need to run just yet. A moment later, once everyone is gathered, Lu Bu begins to speak. He notes that a war between Cao Cao and Yuan Shao is inevitable sooner or later. Cao Cao's campaign here was meant to wipe them out entirely and stabilize his rear. He wanted to occupy all of Shuzhou before facing his greater rival. Although they managed a lucky victory last night, the enemy's numbers still vastly outweigh their own. Continuing a stalemate here offers no real hope of ultimate victory. Deep down, they all know the hard truth of their situation. And so, we realize that they simply cannot stay in Shuzhou any longer. The idea of taking his officers and returning to Bingzhou crosses his mind. Since the lords of the East harbor such deep hostility toward him, perhaps his old home offers a foundation. At least there, he might find some local support. However, the distance from Shuzhou to Bingzhou is immense, a journey of 1,000 miles through hostile territory. To think they could march through the lands of Cao Cao and Yuan Shao and arrive safely is, to be perfectly honest, nothing but a pipe dream. Furthermore, Ding Yuan died by his hand. Even if they successfully returned to Bingzhou, given Lu Bu's current reputation, it's doubtful many people would be willing to follow him. Chen Gong then breaks the silence. He suggests that, based on the current situation, there are 3 paths for his lord to choose from. Lu Bu nods, signaling for him to continue. He invites Chun Gong to speak freely, urging Gao Shun and Zhang Liao to also offer their insights. Chen Gong begins to outline the first path. The first option is for our army to cross the river and head east toward Yangzhou. Although Cao Cao's power is vast, it remains confined to the north of the river. He currently has no way to pose an effective threat to the Yangzhou region. Since the death of Lu Zhou, the various lords there have been in a state of constant turmoil. While Sun Tzu's strength is growing, he hasn't fully secured power in Yangzhou yet. If we can find a way to cross the river and move east, we could ensure our survival and perhaps even challenge Sun Tzu for control of the region. To be honest, it's a bold gamble, but a viable one. Most of the area has been pacified by Sun Tzu, and the governor of Yuzhong, Huaxin, stands alone and powerless to resist him. That territory will soon fall to Sun Tzu anyway. As for Yizhou, it is simply too far away to have any significant impact on the central plains for the time being. We see the strategic map becoming clearer. Lu Bu remains calm, asking what the second and third paths might be. Chun Gong continues, explaining that the second path is to seek refuge with Yuan Shu. Yuan Shu may seem to have a strong army, but ever since he arrogantly declared himself emperor, his foundation has been rotting from within. He lives a life of luxury and corruption, ignoring the plight of his people and soldiers. His military is already deserting him, and the populace is filled with resentment. Chen Gong estimates that Yuan Shu will inevitably fall within 2 years. If we join him now, we might be able to claim a piece of his legacy when he collapses. However, we must remember that Yuan Shu has already had a falling out with us. He might not even be willing to take us in. Yes, that is a bit of a problem. Furthermore, since he is a self-proclaimed emperor, joining him might not be the best move for our reputation. Yuan Shu really did play a winning hand quite poorly. If Lu Bu recalls correctly, Yuan Shu is destined to fall around the 4th year of Jinan. Seeking refuge with him now would mean waiting for his inevitable demise. And once Yuan Shu is gone, the situation would only become more chaotic for everyone involved. Lu Bu feels a headache coming on, doubting Yuan Shu would even accept them. He then asks about the third path. Qin Gong explains that the third option is to find a way to quickly cross Yuan Shu's territory and head to Jingzhou to join Lu Biao. Ever since Sun Jian died in battle, Lu Biao has been the sworn enemy of both Yuan Shu and Sun Tzu. Huang Zu is currently stationed in Jiangxia specifically to prevent Sun Tzu from moving north. Meanwhile, Zhang Xiu is stationed in Wansheng to block Cao Cao's southern advance. With the Shu region to the west being weak and stable, Lu Biao doesn't need to worry about his western defenses. If we go to him and offer to guard his eastern border against Yuan Shu, it is unlikely he would refuse us. However, the catch is that Yuan Shu might not be so willing to let us pass through his lands in peace. Ever since Yuan Shu declared himself emperor, he has become as hated as a rat crossing the street. Lu Biao, being of imperial blood, naturally finds him utterly intolerable. Back when the lords united against Dong Zhuo, Yuan Shu held the title of governor of Nanyang, but he was eventually forced by Lu Biao to move his forces eastward. Despite being forced out, Yuan Shu never truly abandoned his ambitions for Jingzhou. To be honest, he was never one to let a grudge go easily. Once the campaign against Dong Zhuo ended, Yuan Shu immediately ordered Sun Jian to attack Jiangxia. Unfortunately, Sun Jian met his end during that campaign. With Sun Jian's death, Yuan Shu's plans to conquer Jingzhou fell apart, leaving a deep-seated enmity between him and Lu Biao that persists to this day. If Yuan Shu learns that Lu Bu intends to seek refuge with his rival, he certainly won't stand idly by. Deep down, however, Lu Bu finds this third option the most appealing. Turning to his trusted commanders, Lu Bu asks Gao Shun and Zhang Liao for their thoughts on the matter. We see the weight of the decision on all their faces. Gao Shun speaks first, admitting he doesn't understand grand strategy, but noting that most of their brothers are from the north and might struggle in the south. He worries that the dense river networks and reliance on naval warfare in the east would be a difficult adjustment for their cavalry-trained soldiers. As for Yuan Shu, Gao Shun points out that the world views him as a traitor. Lu Bu himself had publicly broken ties with him in the past. He fears that if they join Yuan Shu now, Lu Bu will never be able to clear his name. Therefore, he believes joining Lu Biao is the far better path. Gao Shun's words are blunt and to the point. When Yuan Shu declared himself emperor, Lu Bu had personally denounced him as a rebel and a traitor. If he crawls back to him now just to survive, what would be left of his reputation? Zhang Liao bows, agreeing that seeking refuge with Lu Biao is the superior choice. Lu Bu nods and encourages Zhang Liao to speak his mind freely. We notice a subtle distance in their interaction, despite the shared danger. While Gao Shun and Qin Gong address him as Lord, Zhang Liao still uses the formal title of General, showing he hasn't fully committed his heart yet. But Lu Bu isn't worried. They survived the breakout last night, and he believes there will be plenty of time to earn Zhang Liao's true loyalty later. Zhang Liao explains that since most of Yangzhou is already under Sun Tzu's control, they would be facing a man who is both a brilliant warrior and a master strategist. Sun Tzu is surrounded by brilliant minds like Zhou Yu and Zhang Zhao. If they went there merely to survive, Sun Tzu might tolerate them for a time. However, if they tried to challenge him for control of the region, Sun Tzu would attack immediately. With their current strength, they are simply no match for him. Qin Gong sighs, admitting that Zhang Liao is right and that he may have overlooked the sheer difficulty of challenging Sun Tzu in his own territory. Zhang Liao offers a respectful bow to Qin Gong before continuing, noting that the second path, joining Yuan Shu, means aligning with a branded rebel. Seeking refuge with him would effectively destroy their reputation. Furthermore, after 4 years of Yuan Shu's rule, the Huainan region is in utter ruins. The land is barren and abandoned. Even if he welcomed them, there would be no future for their growth under Yuan Shu's failing leadership. Most importantly, Yuan Shu has far too many enemies. If they joined him, they might simply be used as human shields at the first sign of trouble. They would find themselves trapped and controlled as mere subordinates. Lu Bu stands in deep thought for a long time before finally speaking. He decides they will head to Lu Biao. However, before they set out, they must find a way to convince Lu Biao to actually accept them. Lu Biao is no easygoing pushover like Lu Zhang. To seek refuge, one must at least secure his permission first, a sensible precaution, really. If they simply marched their army across the border unannounced, they would likely be intercepted and crushed by Lu Biao's forces before even entering Jingzhou. Qin Gong agrees, noting that Lu Biao maintains his grip on Jingzhou not just through his own cunning, but through the support of 4 great families. The Kai, Kuai, Huang, and Pang families are essential to his power. In particular, Lu Biao relies heavily on Kai Mao, the head of the Kai clan. Rumor has it that Kai Mao is incredibly greedy and constantly locked in power struggles with the other 3 major families. Therefore, their entry into Jingzhou might be made easier if they start by influencing him. Kai Mao is certainly a unique character, to say the least. When Lu Biao was strong, Kai Mao supported him with money, grain, and even his own sister. Yet, the moment Lu Biao fell, old Kai didn't hesitate. He immediately turned to Cao Cao. Regardless of who ruled Jingzhou, the Kai family's wealth remained secure. Lu Bu nods, seeing the opportunity. He asks Qin Gong to travel to Jingzhou immediately. For safety, he assigns Gao Shun to take 10 elite guards to accompany him on the journey. As for the treasures in the treasury, Qin Gong is told to take whatever he needs. Back when Lu Bu served under Dong Zhuo, he had collected no shortage of gold, jewels, and ancient paintings. The Xiaopu treasury is full of such things. If Kai Mao can be bought, so be it. If the man can convince Lu Biao to accept them, Lu Bu wouldn't mind giving him half the treasury. Qin Gong bows, ready to prepare for the mission. He asks one final question. How does Lu Bu plan to convince Yuan Shu to let their army pass through his territory peacefully? Lu Bu scoffs, calling Yuan Shu a skeleton in a tomb. Since his failed declaration, half his army has deserted. He is hardly a threat anymore. He notes that Yuan Shu has few usable troops left, especially after Chunlan and Lei Bo rebelled and deserted him. Lu Bu decides he will personally write a letter informing Yuan Shu that they are heading to Jingzhou to join Zhang Xiao. If he allows their passage, fine, but if he sends troops to block them, they will simply fight to the death. Besides, Shouchuan is quite a distance away, and as long as they move with great speed, even if Yuan Shu receives the news and tries to mobilize, he likely won't catch them in time. Zhang Xiao is essentially a watchdog, placed in Wancheng by Lu Biao to guard against Cao Cao's southern advance. While Yuan Shu and Lu Biao are enemies, he has no real grudge against Zhang Xiao. By claiming they are joining Zhang Xiao, Lu Bu wagers that Yuan Shu won't dare interfere. Gao Shun, however, is surprised. He asks if the general truly had a friendship with Zhang Ji and Zhang Xiao back in Luoyang and Chang'an. Lu Bu admits he didn't. But Yuan Shu doesn't know that, since they all once served under the same old tyrant. Seeking refuge in a time of need sounds plausible enough. Seeing that the decision is made, Gao Shun immediately selects 10 elite swordsmen from the army to accompany Qin Gong and the chests of gold and jewels, heading straight for Xiangyang. Once they depart, Lu Bu quickly pins his letter and sends a messenger, galloping toward Shouchuan. Of course, sending a greeting is one thing, but there is certainly no time to wait for a reply. If they don't flee now, they won't have a chance once Cao Cao regroups his massive army. So, as soon as the letter is sent, Lu Bu leads Zhang Liao and the others on a rapid march westward. Cao Cao may have few cavalry, but his infantry is vast, especially the elite units. With many soldiers lacking horses and the burden of military families, being caught by Cao Cao's main force would mean certain death. Meanwhile, in the camp east of Xiaopu, despite the defeat in last night's battle, Cao Cao's scouts are still diligently performing their duties. Consequently, the news of Lu Bu's escape reaches Cao Cao almost immediately. After a moment of quiet reflection, Cao Cao addresses his advisors, noting that the latest intelligence shows Lu Bu leading his remaining defeated forces toward the west. He asks his men to consider where the man might be heading. The battle for Shuzhou failed to reach a perfect conclusion because of this escape, and deep down, Cao Cao is understandably frustrated. However, given the current situation, he is pragmatic enough to let it go if necessary. The most critical question now is whether to continue the pursuit. Cao Ren bows, noting that west of Xiaopu lies the territory of Yuan Shu and Lu Biao, which is where Lu Bu is likely bound. He is either heading to join Yuan Shu or seeking refuge with Lu Biao. Guo Jia analyzes the situation, noting that Yuan Shu is notoriously fickle. Since the marriage between Yuan Shu's son and Lu Bu's daughter fell through, they have completely fallen out. Thus, Lu Bu likely won't go to him. He will surely turn to Lu Biao, a man who controls the 8 commanderies of Jingzhou with a powerful army and loyal officials. To be honest, he is a formidable rival. If not for Yuan Shao and the others in the north, Cao Cao would have moved against him long ago. Cao Cao asks, if he truly joins Lu Biao, what then? Cao Ren steps forward, requesting permission to lead a pursuit immediately. He is determined to capture and kill Lu Bu once and for all. In Cao Ren's eyes, as long as Lu Bu lives, he will eventually return to be a thorn in the side of the Cao army. It is a persistent worry. Cao Cao does not immediately agree to Cao Ren's proposal. Instead, he turns to Sun Yu and Guo Jia, wanting to hear their thoughts on the matter. Sun Yu bows and admits that he does not support continuing the pursuit of Lu Bu. Cao Cao sighs, asking if it is because of the weather. He wonders if the freezing cold makes the march too difficult, especially since Lu Bu has many cavalry and might be impossible to catch. Sun Yu shakes his head. While Lu Bu has many riders, he also has the Camp Crusher soldiers and Zhang Liao's 1,000 tribesmen with him. Furthermore, the presence of the soldiers' families will significantly slow their pace. Even if our infantry is slow, a determined pursuit could still reach them. However, he believes the primary goal of this campaign was to bring the territory of Shuzhou under control and begin the work of governing it. Since Lu Bu has already fled far from Shuzhou, there is simply no longer a pressing need to continue the hunt. It is a matter of priorities. Besides, Lu Bu is currently like a cornered beast fighting for his life. He will certainly exert every ounce of strength to break through any obstacle. Even if our army manages to catch him, it would result in a bloody struggle, and there is no guarantee we could actually hold him. If he were still trapped in Xiapu, Sun Yu would agree to finish him. But now that he has escaped, the situation has changed entirely. Even if we catch up, we cannot surround him as before. A battle would only result in heavy losses for us, and at most, make him run faster. After all, he rides the red hare. If he truly wants to flee, no one can catch him. Sun Yu's analysis is sound, yet Cao Cao remains frustrated.